Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this podcast. And yes, we are your number one podcast for bringing you stories around death, dying, and grief, all the messiness that comes in between with some amazing people out here changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, this is the live stream, so if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section, and we'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, one other thing before I bring on my guests, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my guest, Suzanne Jabour, to the show. Suzanne, how you doing?
I am great. I feel like I should be like the star of a big, huge action epic in like at the IMAX theater, right? Where I don't think they still do the countdown in the IMAX theater, but here anyway, IMAX was created in Canada, just so you know. Anyway, they used to always have this super big like countdown of like 10, 9, and it was like a laser show. I feel like we're there.
We making it happen. We making it happen. You know what I'm saying? Old school. We're gonna keep it rolling, and we're just gonna help people have fun with us, but also be educated and know that they're not out here by themselves, especially in this grief world, right? Now, before we get started, Suzanne, like we've had an amazing conversation through our pre-interview, right? And so I want you to introduce yourself to the audience. So tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
I'm Suzanne Jabour. I am a grief coach and educator, speaker, author, all the things. Anywhere anyone will let me do anything about grief, I'm there. I will do it. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, so on the West Coast, so pretty much Seattle, but on the other side of the border, if you know much about Seattle. And I come to this, I think, as most of us in the grief space do, after my own catastrophic loss. And so that really has step by step led me down this path of at first needing to know more about grief so that I could survive. And then realizing that there is a whole gap of knowledge and understanding in our collective that is really actually doing harm when we don't want to. And it's creating isolation when what we want is connection. So that's kind of what I'm all about. And we'll get into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into it because you said a lot of right there that I just want to unpack just real briefly. You said surviving grief. This is something that I want to change. We don't have to survive grief. You have to grow with grief, right? Yeah. And grief is one of those things that is very honest, and it's meant to change you. And I think what a lot of people do in survival mode, they don't want to let go of their old selves in order to let them let their new selves evolve into who they need to be in order to fit into the world that is now changed for them, right? So let's elaborate on that a little bit. When we talk about from your thoughts and from your opinions, when you say the word survive grief, what do you mean?
And I love the way that you framed that. So for me, when I started down this path, it really was about survival. So my grief that set me down this path was the death of my son. And I knew that I really was in survival mode. And I think at the beginning, that's kind of how it's supposed to be. What I learned very quickly was for me, and I think for all of us, as you know, grief is a transformational journey, whether we want it to be or not. And I knew very clearly that the person I was before I answered that middle of the night phone call didn't exist anymore. I knew that almost immediately. Like she did not exist. That person, that version of me had been blown to smithereens. And so I had to make choices. I had the opportunity to make choices. I didn't have to. I had that opportunity to make choices about who I wanted to be next, who I wanted to become. And for me, that's what became the gift, was that I was able to do that intentionally. Because you can either be transformed by accident or on purpose. And I didn't want it to be by accident. I wanted it to be purposeful. And I wanted there to be, for me, it helped me kind of not make sense of the loss, because the death of a child is never going to make sense. And we expend a whole lot of energy trying to make sense of the nonsensical. That's part of the grief experience. But it meant that I wasn't wasting the opportunity that I had been given that I never asked for and I desperately didn't want, but I was in the thick of. And it seemed to me, it felt really, it's interesting. I haven't talked about it this way before. It felt really disrespectful of my son and the loss of him for me to not make everything I could out of the opportunity I'd been given.
I love that. I love that. And I want to ask a question. When did you come to that moment where you said, I want to make the most out of it? Because you said a couple of things, the accidental transformation, and then the intentional transformation. Now, I'm only going to speak from my perspective when I say this, right? Because mine was an accident. I didn't know that this is what I was going to do. Just like most of us, right? We never set out and say, this is what we're going to do, and things like that. But you also mentioned the disrespect. Now, I want to talk about that as well. But I want to talk about the accidental versus the intentional, right? And the reason why I say that, because it took me hitting my version of rock bottom. Now, I had stopped drinking. I hadn't drank in quite some time at that, when my unfortunate major loss happened. Now, all losses, depending on the individual, will be a major loss. So I never want to take that away from anyone, right? Just because you and I have something similar as far as child loss, I also have in common with some people, parental loss, sibling loss, friend loss, loss of freedom, loss of innocence, loss of self in general. And I think that's the major one that people really don't put together. So the accidental part was when I hit my version of rock bottom, I'd given up on life. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I calculated my life, and I honestly felt that what my decision was the best decision. It didn't matter what anyone else said. I didn't even take anyone else into consideration when I thought about this. I said, you know what? My sister, she barely knows me, right? And it's probably a really good thing. Now, I love my baby girl. That's my sister. That's my heart. And anyone I've ever told that I care about, they all know that my heart is always with them. But in those moments, it became a selfish journey. I said, you know what? I'm already homeless. It's not like I'm taking up space. Well, no, I take that back. I said, I'm taking up space. The main thing that I told myself was, I'm just going to be another Black man gone. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think about all the things I had survived, gang life, homelessness, alcoholism, you name it, I've been through. And I said, you know what? If this is the way that it needs to be, I can accept it. And I noticed something about me at that present point in time, which is still very, very prevalent. I had no fear of dying. It was gone. Like, whatever happens, happens. But I knew one thing that I said to myself was that since no one else could do it right, I'm going to do the job that they couldn't do. I'm just going to wipe myself out, right? Because I'm a tough cookie, if you want me, you're going to have to fight for it. I'm not just going to lay over and let you do it, right? So we're going to have an interesting fight. But at that present point in time, I gave up. There was nothing else left in me. And for the first time in my life, I could say that I never felt that way before. I've been tired before. I've been beat down before. But I never got to a point to where I just was like, okay, nothing else left. Nothing. And it wasn't a physical tired. It was a more spiritual tired. Like my soul wanted peace.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to give it to him because I was constantly trying to fight. And that's what an accident was, because it took that night sitting out in the middle of a desert when I was ready to pull the trigger. And that's what an accident happened, because that's when I was at my weakest and the most vulnerable. And that's when that light went off and that voice appeared again. And it began to show me my life in a different light. And the intentional part, once I realized what grief was, I said, I want to know everything about this that I possibly can learn.
Yeah.
and I fell in love with it, right? And that's where the gift became more and more evident that everything that I thought that I was going to be no longer existed. That person
Mhm.
no longer exists. This new version of me is the one that I'm excited to go see.
Yep.
So, and that's what I mean by the accidental, intentional living within grief. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. And then I want to get into your story a little bit, of your journey up until
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, the intentional for me was about really that similar realization in very different circumstances, right? But that realization that the person I had been didn't exist anymore. Like I knew she literally did not exist anymore. And so who was I supposed to be next? Like we're so clear on our life path and our vision of how it's supposed to go, right? And when it doesn't, and we have these major ruptures, we know that that path we had laid out isn't there anymore. Like the path where, Ben lives longer than I do, it's not there anymore. The path where
Right.
he's, at his sister's wedding, for example, he's at his own wedding. Like none of that path exists anymore. So you have to really be charting a new course. And for me, the best way I can describe it is a vision I had of myself. And I carried this vision for months and months and months of myself, like my literal self, all of the things that made up Suzanne as big chunky puzzle pieces, like those big puzzles they make on Survivor, those big
Yeah,
3D
yeah.
chunky puzzle pieces. And my arms were full, like extended as far as they could, full, jammed full of puzzle pieces. And tons of pieces were on the ground. And I had no more capacity to carry pieces. And I knew I had to keep moving in baby steps, recreating who I was. So I had to decide what pieces would be left behind. Because I knew my grief wasn't going to be left behind. That was now a part of me. And I made peace with that. I knew I wasn't leaving Ben behind because he will always be part of me. He's a literal piece of my body. So, he will always be part of me. He will always be part of my life, even though he's not here. So if my arms were already full and I was at capacity, what was I leaving behind? And for me, it was things like people pleasing. It was things like, holding on to relationships that no longer served me, holding on to stories that no longer served me. Like it was a fundamental level of personal transformation that I had to make decisions about. If I was at capacity and the person who was reaching out to me was someone that I was in a relationship with, a friendship or whatever, that really wasn't serving me that much, I had no capacity to pretend to be interested, friendly, all of those things. Like my emotional world over capacity. My physical self doesn't work right after grief, right? Nobody tells you that part, but your whole body kind of falls apart for a while. Your brain doesn't work right. I didn't have any capacity to make small talk, for example. I still find small talk very difficult. It's almost 5 years since Ben died. And I still am like, oh, I can't do it. It's so dumb. What a waste of time. Why are we wasting so much time? Anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's sort of all of those pieces that made us up that are, for most of us that we learned in childhood. Right? There are all kinds of things, skills, tools, ways of being we learned that kept us safe as a child. I was 52, I think. I don't really math very well either. 52-ish when Ben died. I was okay with leaving behind some of those skills and tools from childhood that didn't serve me anymore because that was not who I was becoming.
I like that. I like that. And I want to talk about, before we get into I want to talk about what do you mean about disrespecting the disrespect after your son passed?
I really felt, and I still kind of feel, obligation isn't the right word, but our language is woefully underdeveloped when it comes to grief.
Oh yeah.
So obligation is sort of the best I can do, but it's not quite right. Like a need and a drive to be sure that whatever I was doing was intentional, and I was not, Ben died of terminal depression and anxiety. He died by suicide. And I was so clear that I wanted my life to be big enough for both of us. That's maybe the best way that I can express it. That the rich, full life I was going to live with him and my daughter, of course, that I was still supposed to live that rich, full life in a weird way on behalf of both of us. That he no longer had that opportunity. And so it behooved me not to waste mine.
I can get behind that, because when you say it like that, it's like, and again, I'm going to only speak from the perspective of the life that I've lived up until that moment, right? Because I think when we have expectations, and please let me know, what you think about this. When we have expectations of the life before with our children, watching them grow, watching them go up, outlive us, and things like that. And there's a reason why I say expectations, because it's something that I figured. There's one of the first things that I figured out that helped me navigate and accept the grief world, and to begin to develop the language of understanding what it meant. I realized that we wasn't exempt from this. And now I had to go back. I'm not a very religious person, but I wanted to go back to the Bible. And I read many Bibles. I read the Quran. I read, the Book of Buddha. All of these different books. And the one thing that I noticed across them was that there was somebody or multiple people that had experienced these losses. Some of them infants, some of them grown, some of them teenagers, etc. But it didn't matter what color we were. It didn't matter, what gender we were or what age we were, right? There's people who experience these things. So it dawned on me, we're not exempt from this. Yeah. So I have to get rid of the expectation that this was not supposed to happen.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that was the first reality that I had to accept, that, I'm saying, I'm not exempt from this. Nothing makes me special. These things do happen. But also, I saw the commonalities between these individuals. And I began to go, these people have turned around and did some pretty amazing things in their life. I want to do that, right? I want to do this, but then I added something to it. I want to help other people understand the language with it that comes along with it, right? When you experience a major loss, but also to come to a place to where they can begin to redevelop themselves within this loss. Like, not all is lost. It's just part of what you had to go through.
Yeah.
And together, through that connection, through the communication, I can give you something of what I've learned through the knowledge and through the wisdom that's been developed. I want to give this to you because it's a free gift. And I want you to take it and utilize it the best way that you can, because it is yours. And I want you to customize your grief to fit you.
Yeah.
But that was, again, that's just me, and then, I stand behind what you said with the disrespect, because letting go, and this is the evolution part of grief that I'm in now, understanding the letting go part, right? And it's not what people think it is. It's not letting go of the individual in its totality. It's letting go of the chains around your heart to allow yourself to grow, to breathe again, to see joy, because joy can exist with grief. In the sadness, those moments, those memories are there to remind you to laugh, to remind you to be a human being. Like, everything that you're going through is totally normal, right? And to accept the life that you're in, but having the courage to build the life that you still want within that and expand out, right? So that's I can definitely get behind that. Now let's backtrack a little bit. Take us on your journey. Who was Suzanne, the mother, raising your children up until that loss, and how did you navigate it? But now here's another part. How did your daughter navigate this as well? Because we see things as parents through our own eyes, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of hard to see the loss through the eyes if we have children through their eyes. So navigate us through your world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm very grateful that I had already been, for many years, if not decades, interested in, uh, my own growth, right? Self-improvement, growth, curiosity, all of those kinds of things. I already lived in a growth mindset. So that was very actually helpful because I didn't have to find that. I already had that skill set.
Mhm.
And I mean, really, there was nothing wrong with me, right? The Suzanne that ended that day, there was nothing wrong with her. I loved her a lot. She was pretty great, actually. I have two great kids. Ben was 22. My daughter was 25. And so I'm very grateful that everyone was adults at the time, because I think navigating that kind of a loss with young children would be a whole different thing. In some ways, much more difficult. In other ways, maybe simpler. I don't know. I haven't lived that path, but I could imagine it has its own complexities as it does when you're helping a 25-year-old. I loved my job. I had literally just finished my coaching training, and the weekend, Kathleen and I were away the weekend that Ben died, and I was working that weekend on my launch of my coaching program, which had nothing to do with grief. And of course has never happened because all of that just sort of ended. And what I discovered, which was interesting when Ben died, was I was much more comfortable being public than I thought I would be. And that really just started, I started writing on Facebook, just things that were happening to me, things I was thinking of. And the response I got from people about how nobody in their life was talking about grief, either at all or that honestly or in that way, really encouraged me to keep having a voice and keep trying to figure it out, like in front of people, because we don't have a lot of modeling of that, right? We have so much fear around grief that's attached to our fear of death, which I'm with you. I don't fear death either. That we don't share how it really works and what happens to us. We don't talk about the brain fog. We don't talk about the physical symptoms. We don't talk about how confused you are for a really long time. We don't talk about any of that. So it became important to me to just be able to share. And part of it was not a big magnanimous gesture at the time at all. It was not selfless. It was for me to get the spin out of my head, because the amount of stuff that was spinning in my head and the things I couldn't figure out and the stuff that I didn't understand, I had to get it out, and I could get it out by writing. And very rapidly, it became clear that people desperately needed this information, and they needed to understand better, and they needed to know how it really worked. And I was comfortable being very public about that. And that's what has sort of led me down this path of now, speaking on podcasts. I did a TEDx talk. I've been a contributing author in a couple of books. I'm writing my own book. Like, I speak in organizations on big stages. Like, I will literally, anybody who wants to talk about it, I'm in, right? For my daughter, she has chosen to be much more private about her grief, which is totally fine. Because everyone, as you said earlier, everyone has to chart their own path, their own version of how to do this thing, because there isn't any one right way. It's not even the right way for us every time, right? I have other losses as you do, right? My dad died when I was in my early 30s, my mom when I was in my mid 40s. Like, this was not the first loss of someone close to me. I didn't grieve them the same way I grieved Ben. I didn't grieve them the same way I grieved each other. What was really helpful for me was to understand very early on that in a weird way, my daughter and I weren't even grieving the same person. Because my son and her brother were not really the same person.
Right. Right.
My relationship with him and her relationship with him, both healthy and happy and full of love. And the three of us all really enjoyed each other, but they're still not the same relationship.
Right.
And that was a really foundational understanding that I think allowed me to support her to do it however she needed to do it. And to be able to have conversations about how, the impact on us was going to be different. Like, he was supposed to be her, maid of honor at her wedding. They had talked about this for years and years and helped plan the whole thing and, all the stuff. And now he wasn't even going to be there when it eventually happened. And so how did we navigate that? What did we think about that? How do we find ways at special, amazing things like that to have him be present? And we were having those conversations in the very early days about, the things he wouldn't be there for. As you talked about, is unpacking and dismantling those expectations and setting up different ones while being really attuned to how all that is guaranteed to us is the now. It's this present moment. That's all that's guaranteed. Mm-hmm. But do we still want to, as humans, we still want to imagine what's possible. We still want to think about, oh, how would this work? What do I want to do going forward? So it was really important for us to have lots of really open conversations. And that sort of foundational understanding that we weren't actually grieving the same person and that it was okay for the two of us to do it completely differently, I think allowed us to stay really tightly connected through the whole thing, even though we were doing it a completely different way.
Okay. Now, leading up to the loss, what was that like? Because here's what I've heard several people talk about this, and I've lost some people to suicide, and before anybody says anything, it's a trigger warning. Okay, so you have lost somebody to suicide. Just know that we're going to get a little bit more deeper into this, and so I want you to just prepare yourself. If you need to jump off and come back and maybe watch it later, that's totally fine too. But I think these are conversations that we need to have.
Yeah.
And everything, because it happens, and I don't want anybody to get the blunt of it when it does happen. Because the sudden loss can take people down a spiral.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when we think about the loss of suicide, or even the thought of it, right? You know what I'm saying, can be something that people kind of shy away from. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, this is our world that we live in, and these things do happen. Now, when leading up to this, you said that the depression was there, mm-hmm. and a few other factors. So you did see the signs and things like that. Navigate us through that.
I mean, Ben had been battling depression and anxiety for about 12 years by the time he died at 22. So this had been an ongoing conversation, finding of carers, finding of medical professionals, trying different medications. We had been on that path for a long, long time. What's interesting about that particular time in our lives was there were no signs that he was in what we called the pit. So we had conversations, in those many years, he and I, about how he was doing at various different times. Because what's interesting for people to understand, and critical for them to understand, about people who have depression and anxiety is that is one facet of who they are. Because Ben was also joyful and funny and witty and super smart and interested and interesting and many, many other things. Mm-hmm. And he had this illness, which for him ultimately turned out to be terminal. So it's interesting to me that at the time that he died, there were no signs. We weren't having conversations about whether he was in the pit. Our sort of conversation would be, are you in the pit was one, the worst level of his depression. Are you like hanging off the side was another place, right? Of the top in looking into the pit. Are you standing at the edge of it looking in? Those were kind of the ways we would talk about it. And when I talked to his best friends after he died, they agreed that they didn't see any signs either. So that's important for people to know, that even when you're in a family where you're openly discussing their mental health. They know that resources are available, and they understand that you support them 100% in whatever they need. Sometimes it's still a terminal disease. And, one of the things that was the most painful, I remember having a conversation, especially with one of his best friends, and it was the Suicide Awareness Month soonest after he died. I can't remember what month that is because that's how Grief Brain works. And so there were all those memes out about, the things you should be doing to help your friend who has depression and anxiety. And that hit her so hard because, yes, we need to be doing everything we can to help people not die by suicide, to prevent suicide. Absolutely. I will crow that from the mountaintops forever. And sometimes doing everything on that list is still not enough. And that's okay. But we're so caught up in this weird sense around mental health that somehow we should be able to cure it. Somehow, as his mother, I should have been able to fix it. Which, if we flip the score and think about if he'd had terminal cancer, for example, no one would expect I should be able to cure that. But when it comes to mental health, somehow the people in that person's life are supposed to be able to fix it. And that's just not true. And it does us a disservice because it means for people who are survivors of a death by suicide, who are left behind in that ripple that's caused by that death, they're unnecessarily burdened with those expectations from society that they should have been able to do something. And I can tell you, as Ben's mom, I did everything that was possible. And I take great comfort in that in some ways. And I mostly take comfort in knowing that he knew how much he was loved. And he knew that we knew how much he loved us. And if love was enough, so many of our people would still be here. But it's not, because they have an illness.
I like the way you said that. I really do. Now, let's talk about after the loss. How did your life change?
I mean, the life that I knew kind of felt like I was now in a post-apocalyptic nightmare. That's the best way I can describe it. Where in those post-apocalyptic nightmare movies, the haze is all kind of orange and people are all wearing like hazmat suits of some sort. And they're all like marching off into like discover what is possible in this brave new world. That's what my life felt like. But I didn't have a suit and I wasn't marching anywhere. So the world was kind of moving on without me, which I couldn't understand because my world felt like it had been blown to pieces. And, I was just taking baby steps to keep feeling like I was rebuilding something. And I didn't know what it was going to be. And I didn't know how it was going to work. And I didn't know who was going to be in it. I didn't know anything about the movie, right? But I had to be building something because I had this knowing that it like behooved me to live the one precious, beautiful life I'd been given. So that's what it felt like. And it took a long time, like months and months, for it to feel less like that. And in the meantime, we have to keep doing all the things, right? So I'm still working at my job. Bless my direct supervisor, not in any capacity he had ever seen me do before, because I was just I had no capacity, but I did it. I did some of it as well as I could. I did enough, right?
I love it. I love it.
And this is where we do people a huge disservice, right? If you think about showing up back at work, you get 3 to 5 days off if you're lucky, because the person who you've died is somewhere on that list that HR has made of who you get leave for at all.
Right.
And then you're supposed to come back like nothing has happened. It's an unhuman thing we're asking of people. It's catastrophically harmful. So that's why I love working in organizations and helping them figure out how to do that better. I was very fortunate in that my direct supervisor, I'd worked for him for a long time, and he knew Ben and really cared about Ben. So he got how devastating the loss was for me on some kind of level. And so he was fabulous. The step right above him and the whole rest of the way up the corporate structure, absolutely useless. Like actually harmful in some ways, but at best useless. So it really was about, how do you keep taking baby steps? How do you show up where you need to? How do you prioritize yourself? Like, the thing I learned very early was the healthiest version of being selfish. It was like the healthiest version of recognizing all of the unmet needs that I hadn't been even acknowledging for myself. They say, you have to put the air mask on yourself first before you help someone else. And I had lived that way to a degree, but not in the way I had to after Ben died. Because I remember saying to my daughter, you know what, my first priority is me, because I have to figure out how this works now. I don't even understand how life works, and I have to figure that out. And I'm 100% here for you. And everybody else is on their own. And I was able to do that because everybody else were adults. Like there was no young children I had to care for or any of that involved in the extended family. And I really had to, that had to be the focus. Like, I have to take care of myself first. And then I'm 100% here to support you. It's like I have space for the two of us. And everyone else had to kind of earn their way in. Because I couldn't just automatically, no one had automatic entry anymore. There's people in your life that just have automatic entry, either because of the relationship, the name of the relationship, how valuable they are to you, whatever it is, but they have automatic entry. And we got to a point where nobody had automatic entry. It was like, no, we are doing this in a very particular way that suits the two of us. And I know people have all kinds of thinking about how we should be doing it and what people are going to should all over your grief. And you have to not let them. And our way of not letting them was really to have it, I think it's Glennon Doyle's book. Ooh, I'm pretty sure it's Glennon Doyle's book where she talks about, it is her, because she's talking about her relationship with her wife and having to say to people, you know what, on our little island, we're actually really happy. And so unless you can come here and be happy, you can't come. So all the people that were concerned about the choices she was making or thought she should be doing something different got uninvited. And I remember sharing that story with Kathleen and really saying, you know what, like we have to really watch who we let in, because people are going to come in and think we should be doing all kinds of something or other. People who have never walked this path, people who love us but are scared, right? People who want the best for us but don't even know what to suggest are going to want to come and tell us what to do. And that's not going to help us. So we're going to have to, pull up the boat, pull up the bridge, close the gate and really observe and watch and be really intentional about who we let onto this island, where we're actually, even though it's horrifying and awful and devastating, we're actually okay.
I like that. And because at least you had that, and I know there's some people out there that have it too, and they struggle with understanding where their children come from. But also, you said a couple of things. A lot of people was uninvited. Mine was a little bit different. People just uninvited themselves.
Yeah. Most people uninvited themselves. Let's be clear. Yeah. Most people scatter like the cockroaches when the lights come on in the car. Like
exactly. People's like, "Oh my God, this is too much," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's too much for you. I'm the one who's going through it." But I think a lot of times what had happened too was people still expected me to be, and in a lot of ways I still was. People still wanted me to be the one that they could come and pour their problems into to talk about, because I've always been the type of person I'm gonna give it to you straight, regardless of what's going on. I'm gonna give it to you straight, and I can see things from all sides. So if you're wrong, I'm gonna let you know that you're wrong. Don't just come up and tell me one side of the story. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because after you get done, I'm gonna ask, so You
Yeah.
told me all the things that you do, but all of these are reactions and responses of something that you've done. So what did you do? Don't just put the blame on them. Take
Yeah.
some responsibility, because all of this, from what you're saying, could have been prevented. But you're not telling the part of your role that you played into it. So don't expect me to be on your side.
Yeah.
If you respect me as a friend, respect the fact that I'm going to give it to you straight. Because for one, I want you to give it back to me. But now, saying that to say this, because they still expect me to be that person,
Mhm.
and I didn't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I can't do it right now. So when they had no more use of me,
Mm.
and that's the thing. When they had no more use of me, they kind of was like, well, if I can't talk to Tony, then I'm gonna find somebody else to talk to. And I was totally fine with that. And here's where the other side was. I was left to my own thoughts,
Hmm.
right? I was left with my own confusing emotions because I'm not a very emotional individual.
Yeah.
And so when the grief happens, when that hurt, that deep embedded pain happened, I was like, this thing is not going anywhere. And then I found myself, this is when things really, really started to be confusing to me, when I found myself the first time balled up in a corner on the side of my bed, just couldn't move,
Yeah.
crying my eyes out, begging, begging for something to come.
Yeah.
Right. And no one even knew. The many, many nights I sat there just balled up in a corner. People
Yeah.
think that I just got up and and I was sleeping. No, those nights was horrible. I couldn't close my eyes at all. The nightmares, I thought I had nightmares before, but
Yeah.
the nightmares from those nightmares kept playing over and over and over and over, because I had to watch my son die. And as as a child, when he passed away, he was still a child. And I was just like, I can't do this. So sleep exhaustion, but still getting up every day, doing what I'm supposed to do. The grief fog that came into it for the 2 years after he passed, and then I got hit with another major one, which was my mother. And I was like, I don't even have this one under control. What makes you think? Because again, we think that we have to control these things.
Yeah.
Right. Then I get hit with the next one. I'm like, okay, so both my parents are gone. My younger brother is gone, and now my son is gone. Whatever, and that slow spiral. Me thinking to myself, I have to be strong. I have to fight this because
Mm.
I've been a fighter my whole entire life. And I said, you know what? It's just not going to whoop me. I'd have been through too much to let this whoop me, but it did.
Yeah.
No matter how hard I fought, because there's a difference between a physical fight, a mental fight, an emotional fight, and that spiritual fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand the difference, because if it was a fight, I'm a battle dog.
Right.
Let's go
Yeah.
forward, right? You know what I'm saying? And whatever happens, happens. Now, when it comes down to a spiritual fight, you don't necessarily know what you're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting your ego. You're fighting your pride.
Yep.
Right? You're fighting the very thoughts that you have. And here's something that they don't talk about in grief. Your thoughts will betray you.
Yep.
They will tell you, no, you're right. It's not supposed to be this way, and you should go out and destroy the world. That's what I thought. I need to destroy the world. I said, I will destroy the stars.
Yeah.
I would destroy the stars. I would rip the moon in a million pieces to get him back.
Yeah.
I would go to the middle of the sun and put out the flame. That's what it took to get my son back. To get the people that I love back, I'm willing to go to the middle of hell and destroy the devil. You have no idea. I will go up to the heavens, and me and God would have it out. This was my mindset. I'm a battle dog. I'm not afraid of anything. So if this is what I need to do to go and want to get mine back, I'm willing to go to it. Right. And then after a while, the thoughts became, hey, you ain't nothing.
No.
You're just a waste of time.
Mm.
You're a waste of space. Who cares? Look at your life, Tony, right? No one's around you. No one cares about what you're going through. You're just here. You're not even existing anymore.
Yeah.
So why are you still fighting to stay here? Why are you still doing this? Wouldn't it be so much easier to just give in and be done with all of this? That way, we don't even have to deal with everything. You don't have to deal with bills. You don't have to deal with what tomorrow may bring. You don't have to deal with nothing.
All the hard stuff. Yeah.
All the hard stuff, right? And I started saying, you know what? You're absolutely right. Who would care? Who would care about me? I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody in this world. My sister has her own family. All of my family have their own family.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you. So why not just be done with this? And I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. Now, I say that to say this because there's a language that comes with this. I love to call grief its own foreign love language that no one speaks about, right? Or no one really understands. So let's break this down a little bit so people can get a better understanding of what I mean or what we mean about the language, that foreign love language, because that's exactly what it is. People don't understand. Grief is its own love language.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know how to speak it the right way, you can speak life and love into it. You can give people hope. You can even give people a little bit of faith to hold on to until they're able to get strong enough to develop their own belief system. Not everything has to be religion. It could be something so similar as saying, I'm going to get up and I'm going to eat a really good meal today.
Yep.
I'm gonna go to the gym or even maybe take a walk. They see these things, when you walk around like, life doesn't have to be a challenging thing. So let's talk about the language of grief.
I think the first thing that's really important to presence for people is that we don't really have one in English very well in the Western world, right? We really don't. True. And so it makes it hard to talk about something that culturally is already hard to talk about. And it forces us to be creative and to be imperfect and to be messy and good enough and create something different. Because, I knew, and I was talking about this with someone the other day, I knew that story that I had kind of heard and I felt was very present in sort of the zeitgeist that, parents who lose a child are never the same. They never recover. I knew that was not going to be my story. And so if I wasn't going to accept that, then what was I going to do instead? And a lot of it is about really just holding that curiosity to find the language, to even be able to explain to people what's happening to you. And I love what you said about people being like, oh, this is too hard, I'm out. And I had the exact same reaction. People would say, oh, I can't imagine. I'm like, really? Like, what's happened to me is so horrifying to you that you will not allow yourself to even imagine it? Like, how alienating is that? Like, my reality is so appalling to you that you can't even let yourself imagine what might be true for me. That's really problematic because it means that we're isolating ourselves from each other. And we're also isolating ourselves from how life works. Because that expectation we were talking about earlier of like, this is how my life is going to go, and this is how it's going to go for my children and all that, that's all made up imagination. Right? The only thing that's real is what's happening right now. And right now, what's happening is you're telling me you can't relate to what's happened to me even enough to imagine it.
I want to touch on that.
That's super problematic.
It's not problematic. And the reason why I say this, and I get where you're coming from, I do, but I want to add just a different perspective to it, right? Because, and the reason why I said it's not problematic is because unless an individual, so when you and I talk, we talk the language of it, right? We understand what
Yeah.
it feels like to lose a child, right? So we can relate in that area, right? And you know what I'm saying, and several other ones, right? When we talk the language of grief, if someone else was on the outside looking in, even those who are listening right now, listen to us talk. It's a vibe. It's his own little vibe, right?
Yeah.
We get it. We actually get it.
Yeah.
Now take that knowledge, right? And this is where wisdom becomes the power to it. Unless an individual has experienced these things, they'll never understand what we're going through. So it's not problematic. And then we ask individuals to do something so difficult as to imagine themselves losing their child, right? Because now this is where empathy sets in. This is where the empathy sets in. In order for an individual to imagine such loss, they would have to allow their mind to go to the deepest, darkest hurt. I'm not going to say the place, but the deepest, darkest hurt that they can ever imagine. What does that do to an individual who's never imagined it? They begin to worry about what happens to their children now. They begin to imagine life without their parents or their siblings, right? And they may have a full family, but now they're living in a state of fear. I think what we need to do in order to educate people is to normalize the conversations behind it. Yeah. Not to ask them to go outside of their own mental or emotional, spiritual being and say, I have to put no, we have to understand where they're coming from, right? And not to put such a burden on them, but to have a conversation for just in case purposes. So they can be able to be in the space with us without feeling uncomfortable. Right. And I think that's where we have to look at them and go, I still accept your life the way that it is.
Yeah.
Because it's a beautiful thing. But I also have to ask you to accept the life that I'm in or the life that I live as well, because it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I saw you push back a little bit. I want to. Okay,
no. I'm going to push back on your pushback because.
Okay, come on.
Yeah, only because I think one of our major sort of systemic and cultural problems with grief is that we're so uncomfortable to have those conversations.
Yes.
And we think that life is not supposed to be uncomfortable. And those of us who speak the language of grief understand that life is actually supposed to be uncomfortable. So when we distance ourselves from each other because we don't want to be uncomfortable, that's problematic. Because all I'm asking, you don't have to go down the rabbit hole. If it will take you down a rabbit hole of fear and confusion and you'll be the one curled up in a ball, I am not asking you to do that. What I am asking is for you to be open to the possibility that the life that I'm living is, as you said, as beautiful, as valid, as life-affirming, as full of potential, as glorious as the one that you're living. Even though I have experienced the death of both of my parents and of my child and of my brother and all the other, people we lose along the way that are colleagues or friends or acquaintances, my life is still just as beautiful as yours.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the gem and the beauty that we miss the opportunity to understand about each other. That your expectation, your dreams for the future are all beautiful. And I don't ask you to give those up. But can you hold at the same time the possibility that a different future would also be beautiful?
I want to add to that, because that was an add to, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when we have these conversations, this is why it's important for us to have these conversations. We need to normalize the conversations around death, dying, and grief, right?
Yeah.
So they have a lot of different things, and that's why part of the journey that I've learned and part of the skills that I've developed was hosting a death cafe. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted people to come in to talk about your fears, right? But also let's look at it in a different light. And you'd be surprised at how many people connect in that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then they begin to normalize it like, man, I never knew that, I'm saying, there was more people that felt this way. Suzanne, we have the opportunity of a lifetime right now. We're in a state of the world where this is what we're here to do,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to be a difficult conversation. And that's why I said
No.
it's like a foreign love language that no
Yeah.
one speaks, but everybody thinks it. It's a human nature, it's the human condition. As long as you're living, breathing, and walking and playing and talking on this earth, you have an expiration date.
Yeah. It's
And
the
it
only
just
guarantee, really.
that's the only guarantee. No one's going
Yep.
to get out of this alive.
No.
Right? So get comfortable with that uncomfortableness. And I think that's where that connection needs to be happening. Get uncomfortable. Get
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. Because if you come around, you may not like what I say, but because I'm going to make you really uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Because I may see some things in life and you may say something and I may say something that you may not agree with. I'm okay with you not agreeing with me. Right?
Yeah.
I just see life in a different light than you do. Right? Now I've been blessed. Now here's the other part to it. Letting go of the people,
Yeah.
to allow the right people to come into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, I learned this lesson the hard way. It was a stumble. It was messy, but it was beautiful messy, right? Along the journey of becoming who I am today. I went through many of people. Or maybe they say they went through me, right? Either which way it goes, I met some pretty amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
These people aren't here anymore. They decided to go do other things. Now, I'm not mad at them.
No.
I really appreciate them. I've learned to have grace and appreciation for the times that I've had with them, regardless of what they may feel about me.
Yes.
Right? Everybody's in that. Look, people's opinion don't mean nothing to me.
It's
right?
none of my business.
It's none of my business, right?
Yep.
And so, but what it did over many years, and I've been doing this work 6 years, and I would say I've gotten to where I am, pretty doggone fast to be able to have the knowledge and the wisdom that I have in these moments. And I'm still a student of this. I love everything about it. And I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. When the time comes and it's time for me to stop, I've been taking my last breath, meaning I've explored every opportunity. I broke through the barriers just like yourself, right? I've done. If you allow me to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? If you allow me to be creative and let you see grief in a different light, maybe in a fun light, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Everything that comes along with it, I accept it. I accept the multitude of the various different lanes that it can go into. Right? Because I want to know. I want to know how the person who specializes in miscarriage loss.
Yeah.
I want to know. I want to know, right? Because I never want to assume anything about anyone, but to be accepting and have the strength. Here's the key: to have the strength to walk with them in their darkest moments. But also have the strength to let them go when it's time to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get it. It's the fine art of acceptance of anybody that comes into your world. When these people left me, you know what I did? I said, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Yeah. I wish you well along your journey, because I realize that people, everyone that we come across, they have their own journeys that they will walk. And sometimes you may get lucky and you find a couple of individuals that walk with you long term.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, the truth of the matter is most people are going to be seasonal, and it's not personal. So that's another key to it is not to take this thing personal.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? You have to be able to accept, be able to still love unconditionally, but also to have grace and gratitude for the time that they spent with you. Right?
Yeah.
Share those memories. You know what I'm saying? And just understand, this whole time, you're just going back home as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the same impact that they're going to have on you, you're going to have on someone else. And so that's the road, this beautiful road. That's the yin and the yang to it. You can't have one without the other.
Yep.
Right? You're going to have to go through some darkness in order to get the light. And it's what you do within those moments that dictate how your path looks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to switch up on you every which way but loose. We've seen the graph of grief. Like there's no straight line. It's going to roll, but it's so similar to the path of success too, right?
Yes.
Now, success has its own look, right? Like grief, but they run hand in hand. That is such a beautiful, beautiful graph when you just look at the little squiggly lines like, I fell off that cliff before, right? But I got up and came across it. So when we talk about grief, and now in this beautiful place, doing the amazing work that you do, and we're going to touch on that a little bit. What is your viewpoint on grief?
Ooh, my viewpoint on grief. I think grief is a gift.
Yes.
I think it's a gift. And if we are prepared to, we're going to go mixed metaphors here. If we're prepared to welcome it in, open it up, is better. I don't know. I don't have the brain capacity to make the metaphor hold, but I do think it's a gift. And I think it's an opportunity to really learn so much. It's such a growth opportunity and such a transformational opportunity.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for connection. And the fact that we miss out on that so much because of the way that our culture works around it is maddening to me. It just irks me so much. It's really an opportunity to embrace the fullness of life. That's what it is at its core. It's the opposite side of the coin to love. And we have to hold that whole coin. We don't just get the love side. We have to have the grief side too.
Yeah.
And if we can embrace that duality, I remember saying to my daughter in the early days, we're going to become masters at holding paradox. Because we can be so grateful for, Ben died during all the weirdness in the world that was COVID. So it was very restricted where we are for all kinds of good reasons. Who could come, how many could come, all the things. So we weren't seeing a lot of people, which turned out to be a huge blessing. But we could be so grateful, for example, that someone was coming to visit us, or that someone had sent us flowers or a card or a meal, and so devastated why they had to do that. We could be both of those things. It's such an opportunity to learn about the both and of it all. Grief is a both and proposition. There's no either or. If you are either oring your grief, you are on a path to frustration and anger and fear and no healing. There's no healing there. The healing is in the both and, right? We were talking about a mother who's written a beautiful memoir, which I'm dying to get my hands on, after the loss of her second son to suicide. And the article I was reading about it was talking about how she understands that she will always feel sadness. And I totally get that. I will always feel sadness. There will always be a kernel of me that is sad that Ben is no longer here.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I can be joyful and life can be beautiful and I can be grateful and I can be annoyed and I can be frustrated. We can be all of those things, right? Sometimes all at the same time, especially in early grief, it just feels like all of them all at the same time. It's this confusing tsunami of all the things. But if we can embrace that both and, grief really gives us the opportunity to learn that.
Mm-hmm. I got an analogy for that.
Yeah.
When it comes down to grief, right? And this is where we look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
The person who is grieving or have experienced this loss, the analogy or this phrase goes, most people are afraid, and I've said this several times before, and it's such a deep thing once you can begin to break it down. Most people are afraid that you're going to see them the way that they see themselves when they look in the mirror.
Mm.
Think about that for a minute, right? It's such a
Mhm.
deep statement. Most people are afraid that you're going to see them the way that they see themselves when they look into the mirror, right? So the question is, who do you see when you look in the mirror? Who do you see? Are you happy with the person that you see?
Yeah.
Because if you're afraid that someone's going to see that pain, look, and I'm when I heard this, it changed the way I saw myself.
Mm-hmm.
Even during this grief process, right? There was times that I would look in the mirror and I could not stand the person that I saw. I hated that individual because of this fact of it was shame and guilt that was associated,
Mm-hmm.
not acceptance. I was still ashamed that I didn't do what I was supposed to do to protect the people that I love. And that
Right.
came from my father, my younger brother, and my son, and all my multiple friends that I lost along the way. My grandmother, my cousins, you know what I'm saying? Things like that, people that I deeply cared about.
Yeah.
I always took the burden of it's my job to protect you. My
Mm.
little sister would tell you the same thing. I told her this yesterday. I was like, it's my job to make sure that you're okay. Anybody
No.
that I care about, I've always taken
No.
it personally and said, it's my job. So, but that's the way I
Yeah.
was raised. You got to
Yep.
remember, it's embedded in me to
That's deep
protect the
conditioning.
people. Right. It is
Yep.
embedded in me to protect the people and care for the people to make sure that you don't want or need of anything. And the sacrifice is myself. I will sacrifice myself to make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
And I've always been that way. Right? There would come with its ups and downs. Yes, most people say, no, it's not your responsibility. I get that. But in deep down inside of me, when you've experienced this sort of loss, and this is coming from being a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is the way I view the world, right? So this is what I've been taught my whole, it's my job to protect and provide for you. And the sacrifice is myself.
Yeah.
Meaning, regardless of who you are, if you're a child walking down the street and you're lost, I will sacrifice myself to make sure that you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
I would sacrifice whatever little bit I have. If it's blowing snow outside and you have nothing, I would give you the shirt off my back and walk around barefooted just to make sure that you're protected and warm.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's just not to the people that I love; it's to anybody.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's a necessity for me to be able to provide that for other people, right? Because the world does not revolve around me, and this has nothing to do with me. It's what we can do to make sure that others feel safe in this world, because the world is full of bad people, right? And I've been around the bad people before.
Mm-hmm.
I've even had some bad people do some really bad things to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 6-year-old me is saying, you got to protect them to make sure that they don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Now, the 50-year-old me is looking at everybody going, I got you. So when I tell a person I got you, I really do mean I got you. So now that goes back to the reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
The shame and the guilt that came along with that because I wasn't able to do this. And I took that person. Like I only had one job. One job was to protect and make sure that they were safe, and I couldn't do it. So I beat myself up a whole lot. Nothing in this world compares to the beat down that you give yourself.
Yeah.
And I was real hard on myself because I didn't do it. So it took me a long time to look at the person in the mirror and go, hey, dude, you're too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
You can't change the way life has been.
Yeah.
You can't change the things that have happened. So when are you going to start to love yourself again? Or better yet, when are you going to start to love yourself, period? Because I didn't love myself. I was very destructive with me, right? Decisions, choices, everything that came along with it. I was very, very hard on. I was hard on myself for that. So it took me a little bit to begin to begin to peel back those layers.
Mm-hmm.
To begin to look at the person that was standing in front of the mirror and go, regardless of anything, Tony, that first I love you, and you really have to mean this. needs to come from you.
Yep.
That way, if you don't get it throughout the day, it doesn't matter. That strength comes from you. So again, the yin and the yang, right?
Yep.
And I noticed what I was saying. He was like, "Oh, no, no, no!" But it took me a long time to get to this point.
Yeah.
Where I can look at life and go, I can't do it right now.
No.
I can't do it right now. So you may have to fight this one alone, because I have to go over here and fight this battle, because there's something inside of there that I have to go in there. But in order for me to go in there and do it, I'm going to have to let you sit right here for a minute. And you're going to have to tough this one out. You're going to have to go in there and fight yours, because that is yours. And
yeah.
who you become is who you need to be in order to get to the next stage of your life.
Yes.
For me, I have to go over here. I don't have to fight this dragon. And I may be roughed up, but I'm not giving up. But I'll be back. And when we come back, we're gonna talk about all of this that just happened. What did you learn from it? Inky Johnson had a really good saying. He still talks about this. Who are you when things are going good? And who are you in the face of adversity?
Mm-hmm.
They're two different people. See, is when things are going good, it's easy for you to be happy. It's easy for you to see the path and go, oh man, and have fun. But in the grit of it all, who are you in the midst of it? And when life tells you no.
Yep.
Right. And you start to lose the people around. Who are you then? Who are you when you're homeless and have to eat out of the trash can? Who are you when you're sitting in a prison cell, right? And nowhere to go and you're trapped with your own thoughts? Who are you when you're laying in a hospital bed because somebody just tried to kill you? Who are you in the midst of war? When you're outnumbered and it seems like no way out, who are you then? Right? It's two totally different things. And I think having the conversations around death, down, and grief actually makes a person question about those moments.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong. Again, I'm just speaking from my own perspective when I say this. So before we wrap this up, what are your thoughts on that? What is your thoughts and your opinions on it?
So it's so interesting, Tony. So for me, one of the pieces I left behind in that rebuilding of my jigsaw puzzle of myself was that sense that I needed to serve to my own detriment. And I'm no longer prepared to do that. I will give you the shirt off my back. I will help you any way that I can, but not to my own detriment, because I have to care for myself first, or my cup runneth empty. And that was a lot of sort of that good girl, we come from very different backgrounds, but some of the conditioning is eerily similar, where we are conditioned that we should put ourselves last and everyone else first. And that's backwards. So for me, that's one of the pieces I left behind, was that sense that I will give and give and give and give, even when the cost to me is untenable. I'm not prepared to do that anymore. The other thing that really struck me was that sense of, I feel so grateful that I was already on this path of self-actualization and transformation and figuring out who I really was and how did I want to be in the world. And one of the things I was really working on and has continued to be part of my grief journey is really being clear, and these two things are linked, really being clear about what is mine to own. And if it's not mine to own, I'm okay with you figuring it out, because if it's yours to own, that's your journey. It's not mine. My journey might be something different. Exactly. I try very hard to not be in conflict with another person's journey, right? We can do our best in the world to be kind. And at the same time, we have to be so clear about, is that mine? Is that mine to own? Or is this actually something that person is supposed to be learning that has little or nothing to do with me? And that's that sense you have of being like, you know what, I'm going to let you go fight that dragon on your own. And I'll be here to bandage you up and like, you know, dry your tears or, you know, whatever it is when you come back. But that battle actually is yours and it's not mine. And the best way that I can serve you is to let you do it.
Yep. Yep.
And that's for those of us that have been conditioned as overgivers, right? As people pleasers, as good girls, as I'm here to protect you, all those stories, which are such big piles of bullshit, right? But all of us who've been conditioned that way, that's really hard. And that for me will be an ongoing lesson, I think, for the rest of forever.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Is that mine to own? And I ask myself that question so often on the daily. Like it's one of my sometimes many times in a day, right?
Yeah.
Is this mine to own? Like, is this actually my battle? Is this, you know, and for me, you know, one of the biggest, you know, differences between us, which people can see if they're watching, is I am very clearly a white woman of privilege and you are very clearly a Black American man. And our life experiences, because of that simple difference, have been entirely different. And I'm very clear that I did nothing to earn that privilege.
Right.
So
But
the thing I watch for when I'm looking at whether it's mine to own is whether my privilege that I didn't earn can make a difference. Because if it can, then it is mine to own.
I like that. I like that. And you know, I want to add to what you just said because you're absolutely right on all those aspects. But I think here's where that connection comes, because although we may have lived two totally different lives, our lives have been parallel.
Yes.
Somehow, some way, they crossed over.
Yep.
Right. And we were able to make that connection and go, what? Oh, and then when we tell our stories, it's like, yeah, we got a lot more in common than anything.
Yes.
So it's, you know, although we may have seen life from different perspectives, we've lived the hardest parts of it, and we've managed to turn it around and do something good with it. And I think when it comes down to it, when we talk about the bullshit of the self-giving and things like that, here's where I'm not even going to push back on it, but I want to add to it just to give a different light to it. I believe that there's some people put into this world that are born fighters.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the sacrifice of self.
Yeah.
The one thing I used to always tell my son, I said, the biggest gift that you can ever give somebody is the sacrifice of is your life for theirs. Because he wanted to go into the military, right? And so they're trained to go out there and say, look, I'm willing to die for your freedoms, just like so many other people, right? And so that's part of me that's embedded. And I was asked this question one time when I was going to Bible study and things like that, and I listened to people have this answer. They said, if you was around at the time when Jesus was crucified, depending on your beliefs and what you want to believe, I don't really care. You know what I'm saying? This is just an analogy. Yeah. Right. You know what I'm saying? If you was around at the time when Jesus was around and he was being crucified, and they asked who amongst you would take his place, what would your answer be?
Oh, that's such a big, juicy question. And I have no idea how people are going to feel about this. But my answer is no.
And see, and that's what the difference is. My answer would be yes, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. Because I think that's his sacrifice to make.
Yeah, but
and
now
who am
the
I
question
to take
was,
that away?
Right, but the question was, who amongst you would take his place? It wasn't a matter of if it's his sacrifice. They're asking another person, would you sacrifice your life for this one? As they say, when they traded Barabbas for Jesus during the time, you have the opportunity to let one person go during this trial. You have a man who's never done anything to anyone, and yet you have a murderer over here.
Mm-hmm.
The two. Who did they choose? Barabbas, the murderer. Right? So now it goes back to what I just said. And again, this is where I may see life a little bit different.
Mhm.
I would give my life for someone else because, for one, if it meant that they can live a good life and they remember my sacrifice for them and they can go out here and do something good, I've lived a good life. It's like a
Mm.
gladiator, right? It's a good death.
Mhm.
I did something so selfless as to give my life to give you a better chance because, for one, you may be able to go out here and do bigger things and better things than me. So what I do, the answer for me was always yes.
Mm. Mhm.
I would give my life for a stranger on the street. I don't care, right? If it meant that it changed their life in a good way, then yeah, I would. So when I was asked this without a second doubt, yes, I would.
Mm.
But see, now here's where the difference is. You still have a child, right? And things like that. And my thought is maybe I've just reached the end of my journey.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
what better gift than I can give you than myself?
Yeah.
People will grieve me, but eventually they're going to forget me, right? Whereas you have a legacy, you have a bloodline. Mine
Mm.
stopped with me. So it's a great gift. It's a beautiful death to be able to
Mm.
give my life for someone else. And I do it a million times over if that's what it was required.
Mm.
Because, for one, my son sacrificed his life for me to have the gift that I have today.
Mhm.
So why would I not pay that forward? So
Mm.
again, nothing is wrong. There's no right or wrong
No, no, no,
answers
there's
to
no right
it.
or wrong
It's the
answer.
perspective of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just sharing my perspective of it. That's it. No more, no less. And I think I was born this way for a reason. Because
Mm.
one day it may come where I may have to give my life for someone else's.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it freely, regardless of what anyone else may think. I will do it freely a million times over, as I said before,
Yeah.
without a second thought. The answer, yes, if I have to die for that 5-year-old kid, you're doggone right. If I have to die for that 65-year-old person, you're doggone right. I would do it a million times over.
Mm.
If it meant that they had one more day, because I'd live every day to the fullest.
Right.
And I'm happy with my life.
Yeah.
And I may not see the totality of it. Or maybe this is the totality of it.
Yeah.
But the question is, that I do everything that I was supposed to do in the life that I was given, in the moments that I waste them? If the answer is no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, and again, just living, just speaking about that, right? We do have a few people that have been tuning in. I think they've just been watching and everything. So I want to, as we begin to wrap this up, anybody have any questions or comments for either myself or Suzanne? Please put them in there. And Suzanne, I got a couple more questions for you. A couple more.
Okay. Go.
First one would be, how can people find you?
I am eternally grateful to my parents that I appear to be the only Suzanne Jabour anywhere. So you can find me as Suzanne Jabour on Facebook. You can find me as Suzanne Jabour on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website at suzannejabour.com.
Okay. Now, second one would be, and I've gotten, I love asking this question. I ask myself this question every week. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, like one that I actually own and have, or one that I wish I had?
It doesn't matter. This is your superpower, and
Oh.
why?
Okay, so if I had a superpower, I have always, since I was a small child, wanted it to be teleportation. Because I am fascinated by all of the places, and I want to be able to get there quickly, and I want to be able to see all the things and meet all the people and experience all the different cultures and all of that. Yeah, it's always been teleportation for me.
Okay.
I don't know if we have a similar, probably not viewing history as children, but there was a show in the olden days called Bewitched, and the daughter could wiggle her nose and go anywhere she wanted.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, I wanted to be Tabitha so badly.
I
Lord,
love
Lord,
that.
I wanted to be Tabitha.
Look, that I Dream of Jeannie. And
Um,
then if you want to go a little bit further, Scooby Doo or Gilligan's Island, The
oh
Love
yeah,
Boat,
all of those. Yep.
right? You know what I'm saying? There's a few of them out there that I still reflect on. Things like that. Just go. Those was good, simple times in life.
Right. I just wanted to be able to wiggle my nose and end up anywhere I wanted. Just imagine
Yeah.
it. Right. And it reoccurs in Harry Potter, right? You use the flu powder and you just think about where you want to go and you're there. I'm like, I am not the only one that has been contemplating how this might work because it shows up
No, you're
on the
not.
regular.
You're absolutely not the only one that has been contemplating that. I know a few people that was like, if I could, I would love to do this. I mean, and I think
Right.
that's part of who you are. It's the traveling spirit, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's a reflection of who you are too, right? You know what I'm saying? Because you experience so many different cultures, you learn so many different things about them, especially when we're in this grief field, because we're always curious about how other people
Yes.
may look at grief, right? And it's the knowledge is key and wisdom is power.
Yeah.
So as much knowledge as we can gather, it makes us more efficient at what we do in this world and
Yeah.
how we do
Exactly.
it, right? So now my last question to you would be, if you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
I would leave it's interesting. I often do two different ones. Today, I'm just going to do one. I would leave the grievers and the supporters who are listening with the knowledge and at least the potential, if it's not knowledge for them yet,
Mhm.
that this grief that has happened, whether it was long ago or yesterday or today, is a gift. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't act like it, but it is.
Yeah. It's the deepest human connection that you can ever have with someone.
Yep.
Because you're going to experience grief one way or another in your lifetime. It's better to start talking about it now.
Yes.
Surround yourself with people that get it and learn as much as you can and not be afraid to be uncomfortable in these conversations.
Yep.
Because one day you may have to be a part of that conversation. It's what you do with it, right? It's the life that you've been given. And this is the yin and the yang to the path that you're on. No one's going to get out of this alive. No one.
Nope.
So make a difference now. Enjoy the laughters, build some really good memories, and know that when you're gone, someone else is going to grieve you. So make sure that when they grieve, they actually do it in a way that's celebratory.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to live your life, right? And make sure that you're doing what you can to make sure that you're uplifting and practicing unconditional love. That's my superpower this week, is understanding and practicing unconditional love to those that I encounter on a day-to-day basis. And with that being said, Suzanne, thank you for such an amazing conversation. It was so much fun. We have to do this again, as always.
Yes.
For everyone else, if this is your first time tuning in, head on over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop the episode. And with that being said, we're going to close out this episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I appreciate you guys for your support, and I love you. And we're going to see you guys in the next one.